Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Unpacked.
Find a comfortable place, listen carefully, and enjoy learning English naturally. Let's begin.
What if I told you that, the simple act of taking a stack of regular ceramic dinner plates out of your kitchen cabinet and just, putting them into a cardboard box could trigger the exact same neurological stress pathways as a major life crisis?
I mean, it sounds completely absurd when you say it out loud.
Right. It sounds ridiculous. We usually just rank moving into a new house as, an annoyance, like a logistical headache.
Oh, absolutely. A weekend ruined.
Yeah, exactly. But psychological studies consistently show that relocation is actually considered one of the most traumatic events in a person's adult life.
It's massive.
It frequently ranks right up there alongside going through a divorce or experiencing a major career loss. It is a profound neurological shock to the system. And yet, we usually just complain about having to rent the moving truck.
Right, because it's entirely disproportionate when you look at it logically, but it makes complete sense when you look at it biologically.
Okay, unpack that for me, biologically.
Well, we are at our core territorial creatures. We build our entire internal stability on the foundation of our external environment.
So when things around us stay the same, we feel safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you dismantle that environment, you aren't just, moving objects from point A to point B. You are literally dismantling your entire sense of predictability and safety.
Which actually brings up this really fascinating contrast. Think about an architectural blueprint for a second.
Okay, sure.
When you look at a blueprint of a house, there is this expectation of total, absolute precision, right? It's a grid. You see the load-bearing walls, the exact square footage of the living room.
The precise angle of the staircase.
Yes. It is objective reality, just, rendered on a piece of paper. It tells you exactly what the space is.
It's purely mathematical. It's binary, really. There's a wall here. There is not a wall there. The physical dimensions are just indisputable.
Right, and that mathematical certainty is comforting in a way. But then you actually step into the physical space. You begin the experience of living inside that structure, and suddenly that blueprint feels entirely useless.
Because it doesn't account for life.
Exactly. It doesn't tell you where the afternoon sunlight is going to hit your favorite reading chair. It doesn't show that exact spot on the kitchen counter where you always drop your keys, or, the corner of the hallway where the floorboards creak when you're trying to sneak a midnight snack.
It's the classic map versus the territory conundrum, really. We like to think of a house as a purely physical structure, right? Like it's just bricks, glass, wood, and concrete.
Right.
But the reality of dwelling, the reality of actually inhabiting a space, is that it is fundamentally a psychological landscape. The blueprint is just the canvas. The life lead inside it, that invisible web of habits and memories, that is the paint.
And that invisible web is exactly what we are getting into today. So welcome to the deep dive. If you are settling into your seat for a 1-hour flight right now, or maybe you just have a really long, quiet commute ahead of you, I want to say you are in the absolute perfect headspace for today's journey.
It's the perfect environment to reflect on this.
It really is. Because today, we're talking about transition. Specifically, the universally dreaded, chaotic, physically and emotionally exhausting process of moving into a new house.
Which is an experience almost all of us share, right? And almost all of us find it incredibly taxing. It's this universal friction point in the human experience.
That is universally stressful.
Yeah.
But today, our source material completely flips that script. We are diving into a deeply evocative, just beautifully detailed essay by Kathleen Pandy titled Moving into a New House. It's from a collection called English Unpacked.
It's a wonderful piece of writing.
It really is. And I want to set expectations right up front for you listening. Our mission today is not, I repeat, not to give you a literal step-by-step guide to packing boxes. Yeah, don't worry, we are not going to tell you how to wrap your fragile glassware or how to properly tape the bottom of a heavy box.
The logistics of moving are well documented elsewhere. What we have here is something much more valuable.
Exactly. Instead, we are using Pandy's highly relatable, deeply personal narrative to explore the psychology of transition itself. We're going to unpack the alchemy of how a physical space, like a structure made of drywall and fresh paint, actually transforms into a sanctuary of memories.
We're looking at why moving is such a profound psychological reset, how our brains process new environments, and how the physical objects we carry with us actually serve as anchors for our very identity.
Right, because what is truly fascinating about this text is how it captures the sensory and psychological layers of a move. Pandy manages to take an event that usually induces panic and this feeling of total loss of control, and she turns it into this profound, almost Zen-like meditation on human adaptability.
She breaks down the architecture of memory in a way that reveals a lot about how our minds operate on a daily basis.
So let's just dive right into the deep end. We begin our analysis exactly where the source essay begins, which is the morning of the move. Pandy paints this incredibly vivid picture. It is a cool, bright, clear morning. She wakes up early.
Setting a very calm scene for what is usually a chaotic day.
Yeah, very calm. But the very first image we get, the baseline reality of the text, is the old house. The familiar safe house is reduced entirely to labeled cardboard boxes.
It is the literal deconstruction of home, the physical manifestation of dismantling your life.
And it's such a jarring visual. She looks around and sees small boxes, large boxes, all stacked up in corners, and they all have these clinical, utilitarian labels written in marker. Kitchen, bedroom, books, clothes, shoes, dishes.
Just categorizing her entire existence.
Yeah, and she notes in the text that looking at these boxes makes her smile, but it also feels incredibly strange. Because every single room in this house, before it was put into these boxes, was tied to a very specific memory.
This is where we see the concept of cognitive mapping in real time. She is mentally projecting her past onto the physical space, even as it is being taken apart.
What do you mean by projecting?
Well, the living room wasn't just a 10 by 12 square of drywall to her, right? It was the specific environment where she watched movies with her family. The kitchen wasn't just a place with appliances. It was where they cooked dinner together, where conversations happened.
Right, it has an emotional footprint.
Exactly. The bedroom was the sanctuary for reading before sleep. Even the small garden in the front was a repository of happy days. We don't just live in a house. We encode our experiences into the geometry of the rooms.
I want to pause on that for a second because I have this theory that we don't actually see our houses most of the time. We just see our stuff.
That's a very astute observation.
And Pandy has this really striking moment that backs this up perfectly. Before she leaves, she walks through the empty rooms one last time. The pictures have been taken down from the walls, the heavy furniture has been moved out, and she observes something that I think everyone listening who has ever moved has felt.
The change in the space itself.
Yes. She says that without the furniture, the rooms looked much bigger than before. She actually says it was hard to believe this had been her home. So why does the physics of the room seem to change just because the couch is gone?
Your theory is actually spot on here. It comes down to how our visual perception is tied to our psychological reality. When we live in a space, we don't actually see the walls.
You don't.
No, your brain filters them out as static background data. What your brain focuses on is your relationship to the objects within those walls. We cognitively map our daily lives onto our furniture, our art, our clutter.
So the walls just sort of disappear.
Exactly. The space feels full because it is dense with your routine and your personal history. When you strip all of that away, you are actively breaking that cognitive map.
So the illusion of the space being mine just evaporates the moment my favorite chair is put on a truck.
Precisely. You are reverting a highly personalized sanctuary back into its base architectural form. It goes back to being the blueprint. That's why it feels strange, and why the rooms look perceptually larger.
Because there's nothing for the eye to catch on.
Right. The psychological weight, the density of the memories that usually fill the space has literally been boxed up and removed.
Right.
The walls recede into the distance because they are no longer holding your life. They're just holding up the roof. The house is reverting to a mere building.
It is almost haunting, honestly, walking through your own empty house. The echoes alone make you realize how much sound the furniture was absorbing.
Oh, the echoes are always so jarring.
Very jarring. Now, let's bring in the chaos factor. The moving truck arrives exactly at 8 a.m. We get this detailed scene of two friendly workers wrapping heavy furniture in thick, protective blankets to prevent scratches.
Standard procedure.
Right. They are wrapping the sofa, the dining table, the fridge, and Pandy is hovering. She is watching everything closely. She explicitly notes that while moving is exciting, people worry about things breaking. So she stands there and checks every single box before it goes into the truck.
Which is a very normal, highly relatable response to the absolute chaos of moving. We try to assert control over the physical objects because we cannot control the emotional upheaval of the transition itself.
I get that on a surface level.
Yeah.
But I want to challenge this idea a bit. Is the anxiety of moving, like that heart-stopping fear when a box gets dropped, is it really just about breaking a dinner plate?
What do you mean?
Well, if a mover drops a box of my plates, I can go to a big box store and buy a new set for like $20. It's an annoying expense, sure, But it shouldn't cause existential dread. So why are we so terrified of the things breaking?
Because it is not about the plate's utility or its financial value. If we connect this to the broader psychology of identity, it is absolutely about the fear of fracturing our continuity.
Fracturing our continuity.
Yes. Think about the specific box that catches Pandy's attention right after she has this thought about things breaking.
Ah, the box of photo albums.
Right. It's a small box, heavy with physical photographs from birthdays, family trips, school days. She opens it for just a moment amidst all the rushing of the movers, and she has this epiphany. She realizes a house is not made of walls and windows, it's made of the shared moments inside it.
So the objects are just stand-ins for the moment.
Exactly. We don't fear the plate breaking because we need a vessel for our food. We fear the plate breaking because it is the exact plate we used at Thanksgiving for the last 10 years. The objects we choose to keep are physical manifestations of our lived experiences.
So they aren't just things, they are basically memory storage devices.
That's a great way to put it. They are external hard drives for our personal history. If the object breaks, we subconsciously fear that the memory or the piece of our identity that is attached to it might be lost, damaged, or somehow severed from our future. The continuity of our life story feels threatened.
Wow, the illusion of fragility. We are projecting our own emotional vulnerability during this massive transition onto these floozy cardboard boxes. We feel fragile, so we assume the boxes are fragile.
That's a very poetic way of looking at it, but psychologically very sound.
And speaking of vulnerability and the desperate need for control, we have to talk about the survival backpack. I absolutely love this detail in the text.
It is a brilliant, incredibly telling behavioral detail.
The moving truck is almost completely full, right? The movers are ready to close the doors. But Pandy refuses to pack her personal backpack into the truck. She insists on keeping it with her.
Which almost everyone does.
Exactly. And what does she keep in it? Her wallet, her phone, her important documents, and her house keys. She says keeping them close made her feel more relaxed. Now, I have done this exact same thing during every move of my life. Everyone does. We cling to this little bag of bureaucracy like it's a life raft. Why do we do this?
In environmental psychology, this behavior is linked to maintaining a locus of control during a period of acute environmental instability.
A locus of control.
Yes. During a move, your entire life is completely out of your hands. Your bed, your clothes, your books, everything that makes up your daily routine is in a truck being driven away by strangers. You are entirely untethered from your physical foundation.
They're just floating.
Exactly. By keeping that backpack on your person, you are hoarding the essential markers of your identity and your autonomy.
It's like I'm proving to the universe that I still exist. The wallet proves my identity and financial agency. The phone connects me to my social network so I'm not isolated. The keys give me access to physical shelter.
That is exactly what it is. It is a primal instinct masked as modern convenience. In the midst of the chaos of moving, you are essentially packing an ancient survival kit.
That's so funny, a survival kit made of credit cards and a phone charger.
But it works. It provides immense psychological relief because subconsciously your brain is doing a risk assessment and concluding no matter what happens to that truck, even if it drives off a cliff or gets lost forever, I have the foundational tools required to verify my existence, access necessary resources, and secure shelter. It is the ultimate anchor in a sea of cardboard and uncertainty.
Okay, so the truck pulls away. The old door is closed gently for the last time. The past is officially packed away. And now the narrative takes us into what anthropologists might call a liminal space, right? The literal and metaphorical threshold between what was and what will be. Pandy gets in her car for a 30-minute drive to the new house.
And we really need to pay attention to how Pandy describes this drive because it perfectly encapsulates the psychology of transition.
She's looking out the window, watching busy streets give way to quiet neighborhoods, passing schools, parks, and shops. And her internal monologue is this rapid-fire stream of questions.
Right. She's asking herself, will the neighbors be friendly? Is there a nice cafe nearby? Would I enjoy living there? It is the pure, unfiltered anxiety of the blank slate.
But I feel like calling it anxiety might be too simple. What is actually happening in her brain during this drive?
It's not just generalized anxiety. It is a highly specific cognitive state. A transition like this forces the brain into a state of hypervigilant predictive processing.
Predictive processing. Okay, break that down for me.
To understand this, we have to look at how the brain works fundamentally. The human brain is essentially an inference engine.
Meaning it's always trying to guess what's next.
Exactly. Its primary job is to predict what is going to happen next so it can keep you safe and conserve metabolic energy. When you live in the same house in the same neighborhood for years, your brain conserves a massive amount of energy because its predictive model is highly accurate.
It knows the neighbor on the left is grumpy. It knows the cafe down the street is closed on
It
Tuesdays.
knows exactly how hard to pull the front door to get it to lock.
So life is basically on autopilot. The environment is a known variable.
Precisely. But the moment you leave that old house and enter this 30-minute drive, the established model of the world is ripped away. The new environment is entirely unknown. So the brain has to work overtime.
It's scrambling to catch up.
Yes, it is throwing out hypotheses, running simulations, trying to prepare for every possible social and physical scenario in this new territory. That is why she is asking those questions. Her brain is desperately trying to build a new predictive model before she even steps out of the car. It is an incredibly energy-intensive and exhausting cognitive process.
Which explains why you feel completely drained on moving day before you've even lifted a heavy box. Your brain is just redlining, trying to simulate a future that doesn't exist yet.
It's exhausting.
And then the drive ends. They arrive. And here's where the sensory experience gets really interesting. She notes in the text that she had only ever seen the new house in the evening, during the viewings. But now she sees it in the stark daylight of morning. And the aesthetic shift is profound.
It's a completely different atmosphere.
The white walls are shining brilliantly under the morning sun. There's a green front garden with blooming flowers. There's a young tree near the entrance with leaves moving in the wind. And to describe this feeling, she uses this absolutely amazing analogy. She says walking into it felt almost like opening a brand new notebook for the first time.
That is a very specific, evocative image. How does that analogy strike you?
Well, think about the last time you bought a really nice, expensive, completely fresh notebook. There's this undeniable thrill, right? The paper is crisp, the binding is tight, there are no mistakes, no crossed out words. It represents pure, unadulterated potential.
Absolutely.
But accompanying that thrill is a very real, very palpable sense of intimidation.
Oh, yes.
The intimidation of the first blank page. You almost don't want to write in it because you don't want to ruin it with your messy handwriting. You feel this immense pressure to make whatever you put on that first page incredibly meaningful. I think walking into an empty new house is exactly like that. It's pristine. And you are hyper aware that the first things you unpack, the first routines you establish are the ink on that blank page. You are terrified of making a mistake in how you set up your own life.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize the friction of new beginnings. The pristine environment demands intentionality, and intentionality is exhausting.
It really is.
Pandy's sensory experience of this empty space deeply highlights that pristine, almost sterile quality. She notes that without furniture, her footsteps echo loudly through the empty rooms. The sound bounces off the walls because there are no curtains, no rugs, no decorations to absorb it. But the most striking sensory detail she focuses on isn't visual or auditory, it's olfactory. It's the smell.
Yes, she says every house has its own distinct smell. Her old house smelled like coffee and old books. The new house smells like fresh paint and clean wood.
We have to unpack the biology of smell here because it is crucial to understanding how we form attachments to places. Smell is our most primal sense.
More than sight.
Much more primal. Unlike sight or hearing, which are processed through the thalamus, which acts like a relay station that filters information, smell bypasses that entirely. The olfactory bulb has a direct neural pathway to the amygdala and the hippocampus.
Which are the emotional and memory centers of the brain.
Exactly. It is a direct highway to your emotional core. When she smells coffee and books in her old house, she isn't just registering an odor. Her olfactory bulb is triggering the amygdala to release feelings of safety, comfort, and established routine. It is the chemical signature of her past comforts.
Wow, so the smell is literally coding for home.
Yes. The smell of fresh paint and clean wood, on the other hand, is the olfactory equivalent of your blank notebook. It is sterile. It has no emotional history tied to it. It forces her brain to be entirely present in the unwritten newness of the situation, which contributes to that feeling of alienation and intimidation.
It smells like a project, not a home. But before she can even begin to fill that blank notebook, before she allows a single box to be unpacked, she does something very deliberate. She walks through the house alone and systematically secures the perimeter. She turns on every single light switch. She opens the kitchen tap and watches the water flow. She flushes the toilet, tests the shower, checks the power outlets.
Very methodical inspection.
And she notes in the text that finding everything in good working condition made her feel much more comfortable. Now, I have to push back on her priorities here just a bit. You have movers outside sweating, ready to unload a truck full of your heavy furniture. You are on the clock. Why is the very first instinct to walk around and flush a toilet?
It seems illogical if you view moving as merely a logistical task, but if we view it through the lens of human survival, it makes perfect sense. We can look at this through the framework of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay, remind me of the hierarchy.
At the very base of the pyramid are physiological needs: water, warmth, rest. And that's followed immediately by safety and security needs. Before a human being can focus on higher-level emotional tasks like nesting, decorating, or building a sense of belonging and identity, they absolutely must secure their base physiological survival.
So she's not checking the plumbing, she's ensuring she has access to water, light, and sanitation.
Precisely. Establishing that the environment can provide these basic survival elements is a non-negotiable prerequisite for psychological comfort. Until she verifies that the house functions as a viable shelter, her nervous system will remain in a state of high alert.
She can't relax until she knows she can survive there.
Right. She cannot begin the emotional work of turning the space into a home if her brain is subconsciously worried about a lack of running water. Checking the taps and the lights is her primal brain's way of interviewing the house, asking, "Can you sustain my life?"
And once the house answers yes,
Then her nervous system can finally downregulate. She stops producing excess cortisol, and she can shift her focus to the logistical tasks waiting in the truck.
okay, so the house passes the primal survival test. The nervous system calms down. And now, the heavy lifting truly begins. The workers start bringing in the furniture. And here is where we get a fascinating observation about perception and reality. The movers bring in her old sofa, and she directs them to place it near the biggest window, exactly the same layout as in her old house.
Right, trying to recreate the familiar.
The small coffee table goes right in front of it. It's the exact same setup. But as she steps back and looks at it, she realizes that the exact same furniture looks completely different in the new space.
It does. It's a striking moment of cognitive dissonance. She notes that the sofa seems somehow newer, the table looked larger, and the old bookshelf looks special and distinct.
But why does that happen? I mean, objectively, it's the exact same couch. The fabric hasn't changed. The scratches on the legs are still there. How can it look new?
It is the same physical object, but context is everything in visual perception. We touched on this earlier with the idea of the brain filtering out the walls of the old house. In our established environments, we suffer from a psychological phenomenon known as inattentional blindness or habituation.
Habituation.
Yeah.
You just get used to it.
Yes. Because you see your couch every single day for 5 years, your brain stops allocating metabolic energy to actively look at it. It just registers a low-resolution placeholder that says couch. You don't see the texture, you don't see the specific color, you just know it's the thing you sit on.
Right. It's like how you don't feel the clothes you're wearing right now until I mention them.
Yeah.
Your brain just tunes out the static input.
That is the perfect analogy. But when you take that same object, the couch, and you place it in a novel environment, everything changes. The lighting from the window hits it at a different angle. The spatial proportions of the room are different. The wall colors contrasting with the fabric are different.
So the brain has to reevaluate it.
Because the context is entirely novel, you force your brain to break its habituation. It can no longer rely on the low-resolution placeholder. It has to actively process the object anew.
It strips away the filter.
Exactly. The new environment frames the old object differently, forcing us to actually see it again in a high definition. It literally gives old things a fresh beginning. I think it's a beautiful metaphor for how a simple change in context or perspective can completely renew our appreciation for what we already possess, whether that's furniture or perhaps even relationships.
I love that. It's forced mindfulness.
Yeah.
Now let's move from the living room to what is undoubtedly the absolute final boss of unpacking, which is the kitchen.
Oh, the kitchen is universally acknowledged as the most daunting room to pack and unpack.
It's terrifying. It's a logistical nightmare of fragile items and strange shapes. Pandy is standing there, staring at boxes of plates, cups, fragile glasses, heavy pots, and oddly shaped pans. She knows instantly that it will take hours of tedious work.
Which usually leads to a sense of overwhelm.
Right, but instead of rushing, instead of giving into the panic of the pile, she adopts this incredible grounded philosophy. She writes, "A home is not built in one day. It grows slowly, one small step at a time."
Yeah.
By the afternoon, the physical reality sets in. Her arms are sore, her legs need a rest, and she does something so simple yet so profound.
What does she do?
She just sits down on the bare floor of the empty living room with a bottle of water. There's no TV, there are no pictures on the walls, there are no curtains, just a woman sitting on a hard floor. And yet she feels peaceful. She writes, "Sometimes an empty room is full as hope."
It is a remarkable moment of mindfulness, and it stands in stark contrast to how most modern people handle transitions. Usually, the immediate instinct is to banish the emptiness as quickly as possible.
Because the empty room is scary.
People engage in manic unpacking because an empty space feels chaotic, incomplete, or lonely. We are conditioned by a culture of instant gratification. We want the Instagram-ready home the moment the movers leave. But Pandy resists that urge.
She doesn't fight the friction.
No, she accepts it. She recognizes that the physical toll on her body, the sore arms and aching legs, is the necessary price of admission for this new beginning. By sitting on the bare floor with just water, she allows herself to exist in the potential of the space, rather than rushing to force it into a completed state.
Letting it just be a work in progress.
She permits the room to be a vessel for hope, rather than treating it merely as a task to be aggressively finished. It requires a tremendous amount of emotional maturity to sit in an unfinished space and feel at peace.
And that profound peace carries her through the exhaustion of the first night. But the next morning, reality hits hard. She wakes up, opens her eyes, and for a few disorienting seconds, she completely forgets where she is.
That is a very common experience the first morning in a new place.
The ceiling height is wrong, the window is on the wrong wall, the sounds coming from outside are totally unfamiliar. And what does she desperately need to anchor herself? She needs coffee.
A very relatable, highly urgent crisis.
So she stumbles to the kitchen, and it is a disaster zone of unopened boxes. Finding anything is a struggle. She is searching frantically, not just for a cup, but for her specific coffee mug. She has to rip open 3 different boxes before finally finding it hiding behind a stack of plates.
That determination to find the one right mug is fascinating.
And she refers to this in the text as a small success, noting that finding it actually makes her laugh out loud. Now, it's just a mug. Why is she laughing?
She is laughing because of the psychological release of tension. When the macro environment, the whole house, the new neighborhood, the new commute, is completely unfamiliar and overwhelming, human beings instinctively seek refuge in micro-routines.
Okay, micro-routines.
Finding the specific coffee mug you use every single morning is not just about caffeine delivery. It is about reclaiming a tiny, manageable fraction of normalcy.
It makes sense. When the big picture is chaotic, I need the small picture to be absolutely predictable. If I can just hold this familiar mug, the world makes a little bit of sense again.
Exactly. The victory isn't about the mug itself. The victory is about asserting agency over the chaos. Her laughter is the sudden release of all that built-up stress from waking up disoriented. It's an acknowledgement of the absurdity of the situation, tearing through cardboard boxes like a madwoman just for a sip of coffee, and that laughter grounds her back in reality. It is a micro-routine restoring emotional equilibrium.
So, caffeinated, grounded, and ready to face the day, she tackles the heavy boxes, the books. She notes that books are incredibly heavy to carry, but they are essential because they make a house feel warm. She's pulling out old novels, travel guides, cookbooks, and during this process, she finds a forgotten notebook filled with ideas she had written down years earlier.
Finding lost things is one of the hidden joys of moving.
It really is. She describes sitting there, reading her past thoughts, as meeting an older version of myself. And this naturally transitions into her opening the box of personal decorations.
Which is where the emotional heavy lifting truly begins. This is the process of unpacking the self.
She pulls out a wooden elephant from a trip to Thailand, a tiny ceramic lighthouse from a vacation to the coast, a colorful cheap magnet from a weekend in Italy. And here, the author actively pushes back against a very common societal assumption. She says, people often think that decorations are just objects. In reality, they tell the story of our lives.
This raises a deeply important question about how we construct our living spaces and how we view materialism. We tend to dismiss decorations as frivolous, as mere clutter, or as purely aesthetic choices driven by interior design trends.
Like it's just stuff gathering dust.
But psychologically speaking, if we look at the theory of embodied cognition, our homes are essentially three-dimensional physical autobiographies.
A 3D autobiography. That is a brilliant way to phrase it, because they aren't just things, they are prompts.
They are powerful cognitive prompts. The wooden elephant isn't just a piece of carved wood. It is the embodied memory of the sounds, the humidity, and the smells of Thailand. The tiny lighthouse is the sensory recall of the cold ocean breeze on that specific coast. When she carefully places these items on her new shelves and when she hangs a family photograph in the new hallway, she is literally externalizing her internal identity.
She is taking the contents of her brain
Yeah.
and mapping them onto the physical environment.
Yes, she is anchoring her past to these new sterile white walls. The space transforms from a mere architectural structure into a personal sanctuary, specifically because she's weaving her unique life story into its physical fabric. As she notes in the essay, once those items were placed, the room no longer felt empty. It felt personal. The blueprint has been successfully painted over with her identity.
Okay, so the internal identity is established. The inside of the house is starting to reflect who she is. But human beings are not hermits. We are social, exploratory creatures. Once our immediate den is secure and identifiable, instinct drives us to understand and map our external surroundings. So around lunchtime, Pandy decides to expand her map. She leaves the safety of the house to explore the neighborhood.
This is a crucial transition from the private, controlled sphere to the public, uncontrolled sphere.
Exactly. She walks out her front door and heads toward a local cafe. And she notes in the text how incredibly interesting it is to walk through a new neighborhood. Every single street feels like a small adventure. She's noticing everything. The specific types of trees, the colors of the flowers in the gardens, the architecture of the houses.
Taking in all that new data.
She points out that these are all small details that local people who have lived there for years probably see every day but just completely ignore.
This circles perfectly back to what we discussed earlier regarding the couch and inattentional blindness. The locals don't see the flowers or the architecture because their brains have long since filtered them out as irrelevant background data. They are walking around on autopilot, conserving energy.
But Pandy's brain is doing the opposite.
Because Pandy is still in that heightened state of predictive processing. Her brain is soaking up every single visual detail, scanning for threats and resources, trying to build a new mental map of her territory. Because of that, she is experiencing the neighborhood in high definition.
She finds a cafe about 5 minutes away. It's clean, full of bright natural light. She orders a simple sandwich and tomato soup, and she just sits and observes. She watches people reading, working on laptops, friends laughing over coffee. The atmosphere feels warm and welcoming, which starts to soothe that hypervigilant state.
It's proof of a safe environment.
But then, after lunch, she goes to the supermarket. And I have to say, this part of the source material absolutely fascinated me. She walks into a supermarket that is much bigger than she expected. And she doesn't just grab a basket, get her milk, and leave. She deliberately walks down every single aisle of the store.
She is aggressively mapping the terrain.
She literally maps it out in her head. She notes fresh fruit at the entrance, bread all the way at the back, cleaning products on the left side, frozen food near the end. She writes, "Knowing where to shop makes daily life much easier." Okay, I need to understand the underlying mechanism here. Why dedicate so much precious mental energy on the very day after you move, when you're already physically exhausted and overwhelmed, to memorize the layout of a grocery store?
Because knowing where the bread is located actively reduces her future cognitive load.
Break that down for me. I always thought this behavior was just me being a control freak. There's a biological reason.
It is entirely biological and neurological. Think about your daily routines in a familiar place. When you know exactly where the supermarket is and you know exactly which aisle holds your preferred brand of milk, you can perform that task on autopilot.
Right. I don't even think about it.
Your brain does not have to expend precious energy searching, evaluating options, and making spatial decisions. You just walk in, grab it, and leave. But when everything is new, your cognitive load is maxed out. Every single action, finding the store, figuring out the layout, locating the milk, requires conscious, high-level executive function and thought.
It's decision fatigue before you even start your day.
Exactly. By deliberately walking every aisle and mapping the supermarket, she is spending a large amount of energy today to save a massive amount of energy tomorrow. She is transforming an unpredictable wilderness, a giant, visually overwhelming store full of strangers and unknown product locations, into a predictable, reliable resource.
It's exactly like clearing the fog of war in a strategy video game.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
When you start a new game, the map is dark. You have to send your character to walk around the edges of the map to reveal the terrain, just so you can see where the resources are. Once the map is revealed, you don't have to stress about the unknown anymore.
That is a brilliant analogy and perfectly accurate to how the brain maps physical space in the hippocampus. She is clearing the fog of war to secure her supply lines. Doing this proactively lowers her baseline anxiety, making her feel infinitely more secure in her new environment because she knows exactly how to acquire sustenance without friction.
And while she's securing those supply lines, she buys basics like milk, eggs, bread, butter, soap. But she makes one specific purchase that stands out because it isn't a basic survival necessity. She buys a small green plant for the living room window.
Ah, yes.
She notes in the text that it wasn't necessary, but a little green plant can completely change the feeling of a room.
Which is a profound realization on her part. She has secured the biological necessities, the water, the food, the shelter, and now she is making a direct investment in her psychological well-being. She is intentionally bringing a piece of living, breathing nature into this sterile, boxed-up environment.
Bringing some life into the box.
It introduces a vital energy, a biological symbol of growth and life, into a space that has felt very static and architectural.
So he goes home, places the plant by the window where it gets plenty of sunlight, and she notes that it looks perfect. And then, that very afternoon, the true catalyst for her sense of belonging occurs. There is a knock on the front door. She opens it to find an elderly woman holding a small basket of homemade cookies.
The absolute universal symbol of neighborly goodwill.
It's almost a movie trope, but it happens. "Hello," the woman says. "I'm your neighbor. Welcome to the neighborhood." Pandy invites her in for tea, and they chat. And this neighbor turns out to be an absolute goldmine of local information.
I bet she knows everything about everyone.
She does. She has lived on this specific street for over 20 years. She points out the living room window and starts mapping the human element of the street for Pandy. She says the family across the street has 2 young kids, the man next door is a doctor, the woman on the corner loves gardening and sharing tomatoes.
I would argue that this single interaction is the most important psychological moment in the entire essay.
Really? More than unpacking the memories or mapping the supermarket. Why?
It is paramount. And it's not because of the cookies, though reciprocal gifting certainly helps establish a positive evolutionary dynamic. It's important because the neighbor acts as a social translator.
Social translator.
Before this knock on the door, the houses on the street were just physical structures made of brick and siding. The people walking by were just anonymous strangers. The environment was physically mapped by Pandy, but it remained socially blank.
Right. She knew where the supermarket was, but if there was an emergency, she didn't know who lived next door.
Exactly. The elderly neighbor provides the missing social map. She gives the physical environment a human narrative. Suddenly, it's not just an anonymous street filled with potential threats, it is a community. It has a doctor, a gardener, and playing children. This interaction shrinks the neighborhood from a vast, unpredictable unknown into a knowable, human-scale village.
It makes it feel manageable.
This provides a massive neurological sense of social safety. As Pandy notes so astutely, a new house is important. A good neighborhood is even more important. You can control the inside of your house, but your external peace of mind depends entirely on the social fabric around you.
That's beautifully put. The neighborhood shrinks and the community expands. And this neighbor leaves her with this final validation before she goes, "If you ever need anything, just knock on my door." That simple offer of kindness stays in Pandy's mind for the rest of the day.
It weaves a safety net. She knows, on a primal level, that she is no longer entirely alone in this new territory. She has an ally.
So with the external geographic map drawn and the social safety net established, Pandy turns her focus back inward to the house. We move into the evening of the second day, and we see these very deliberate rituals of dwelling taking shape.
Establishing the new routines.
Yes, she goes to the bedroom. She doesn't just pull clothes out of boxes and throw them on a chair. She organizes them meticulously. Shoes lined up perfectly on the bottom shelf, jackets hung neatly, spaced out, clean towels placed in a specific drawer in the bathroom, toothbrushes lined up beside the sink, soap placed perfectly near the mirror. And brilliantly, she places another small plant on the bathroom shelf.
She understands implicitly that creating physical order creates mental ease. There is a deep connection between our external environments and our internal cognitive states. When your external environment is cluttered and chaotic, your internal state often mirrors that chaos, leading to heightened anxiety.
Absolutely. When I can't find my keys because my desk is a mess, I feel like my entire life is falling apart. The physical mess becomes emotional distress.
We all experience that. By putting the shoes precisely on the bottom shelf and hanging the jackets neatly, she is asserting dominion over the space. She writes, "When everything has its place, daily life becomes easier." She is intentionally designing a low-friction environment for her future self.
A gift to her future self.
Every organized drawer, every neatly hung jacket is a gift of saved time and mental energy to her tired brain tomorrow morning.
And as she finishes this meticulous organization, the sun begins to set. Warm orange light enters through the windows. The house looks totally different from the stark, bright morning. And she admits it isn't perfect. There are still unopened boxes in the corner, the walls are still mostly empty, the bookshelves are only half full. But she explicitly says that none of that bothered her. Instead of seeing unfinished work, she saw possibilities.
That is a masterclass in conscious cognitive reframing.
Right, because it is so incredibly easy to look at a half-empty bookshelves and feel overwhelmed by the sheer task of having to unpack the rest of the books.
It is the default human setting to focus on the deficit. What is missing, what is wrong, what still needs to be done. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism to constantly scan for the problem, but she consciously overrides that ancient hardware.
She chooses to see the positive.
She looks at the empty shelf and doesn't see a chore. She sees a future conversation. She sees the book she has yet to read and place there. She looks at the empty wall and imagines the photographs of memories she hasn't even made yet. She has successfully shifted her perspective from the stress of the present transition to the exciting potential of the future.
And then she grounds herself right back in the present moment with a very fundamental, very human ritual. The first home-cooked meal.
That's a big milestone in a new house.
It really is. She cooks dinner in the new kitchen. It's nothing fancy, just simple rice, vegetables, and grilled chicken. But she notes the act of preparing this simple meal, the smells filling the air, made the kitchen feel alive. She sits alone at the dining table, eating, and she watches the streetlights turn on outside. She listens to a gentle breeze, and she hears children playing and a dog barking in the distance.
These are the exact unfamiliar sounds she was worrying about during the 30-minute drive.
Yes, and she has this moment of profound clarity. She realizes that right now, today, these sounds are unfamiliar and noticeable. But soon, very soon, they will become the invisible background soundtrack of her everyday life. She washes her dishes, turns off the kitchen light, and comes to this overarching realization. Moving to a new house is not about finishing everything in one day. It is about slowly creating a place where you feel comfortable. A home grows little by little. One room, one conversation, one memory, one day at a time.
It is a profound rejection of that modern pressure we discussed earlier. The pressure to have a perfect, finalized home the moment you move in. We often treat moving as a project to be completed as quickly and aggressively as possible. But Pandy is reminding us that dwelling is a verb.
It's an ongoing process.
It is a process, not a product. It requires the slow, organic accumulation of time and lived experience.
Which brings us smoothly to the weekend. It's Saturday. Most of the heavy lifting and unpacking is done. The house is starting to genuinely feel comfortable. So what does she do? She decides to clean the house from top to bottom. She vacuums the floors, wipes down the tables, cleans the windows to let more light in, arranges the cushions on the couch. She notes that the physical act of moving leaves behind a lot of dust and dirt, but also that cleaning gives a wonderful feeling. She writes, when your home is clean and organized, your mind often feels calmer too.
It goes beyond mere hygiene. This is a ritual of purification and ownership. She didn't make the dust from the move. The movers brought it in. The cardboard boxes created it. But by actively cleaning it, she is claiming the space.
Claiming it as her own.
She is literally wiping away the residue of the transition period and asserting her own physical order over the environment. It is a very active, tangible way of saying, this territory is officially mine now.
And then she decides the living room needs more vibrant color. So she visits a local gardening shop. She buys 2 small blooming plants and 1 large leafy plant. She places them strategically near the windows. And she notes the difference was amazing. The room instantly felt fresh and alive. She says plants have a simple way of making a house feel warmer.
They do because, as we mentioned before, they bring biological rhythm into a static architectural space. They need water, they react to the cycle of the sun, they drop leaves. They force the inhabitant into an ongoing, nurturing relationship with the space itself. You aren't just living in a box, you are tending to an ecosystem.
Later that Saturday afternoon, she invites her parents over. They had helped her pack and prepare for the move, but they hadn't seen the finished house yet. And this scene provides a beautiful moment of external validation. Her mother walks in, takes a breath, and immediately says, "It feels very comfortable here." Her father looks around, notices the details, and says, "The furniture fits well here. This house has really good natural light."
Why do you think their specific reaction is so important to her mental state?
I think it's because we lose all objectivity when we are in the weeds of a project. She actually answers this in the text beautifully. She says that sometimes we become so busy and so focused on the work that we only notice what is still unfinished. Other people help us see how much we have already accomplished. When you are the one carrying the heavy boxes, all you see is the labor. When someone else walks in, they only see the result.
Exactly. Her parents are acting as a mirror, reflecting back the objective success of her efforts. They validate that her difficult emotional translation of a house into a home was actually successful. They can physically feel the comfort she works so hard to curate. It proves it isn't just in her head.
And sitting there with her parents in the living room, drinking tea, laughing about old memories, the conversation naturally turns to her very first apartment from years ago. She describes it as tiny. The kitchen and the living room were basically the same space. There was no balcony. But she remembers being so proud of it because it was her first real home. She looks back at that memory from where she sits now, and she realizes a profound truth. A home does not need to be large. It only needs to feel safe, comfortable, and full of kindness.
Which beautifully separates the emotional concept of home from its real estate value or square footage. The architectural blueprint, the size of the rooms, does not determine the quality of the dwelling. The emotional atmosphere, the safety, and the connections fostered within it do.
Which perfectly sets up her activity later that evening after her parents leave. She sits quietly at the kitchen table with a notebook. But she doesn't write a to-do list for tomorrow. She doesn't write a shopping list for the supermarket she mapped. She writes a gratitude list. She writes down, I am thankful for a warm bed. I am thankful for clean water. I am thankful for kind neighbors. I am thankful for this new beginning.
It is the ultimate shift from deficit thinking to abundance thinking.
Completely. She explicitly writes that these thoughts changed her mood. Instead of lying in bed thinking about what she still needed to buy or fix, she focused entirely on everything she already had securely in place.
It is a highly effective, scientifically backed psychological tool. When we undergo massive life transitions, our brains are hardwired to be hyper-focused on threats, unfulfilled needs, and pending tasks. Writing a gratitude list forces the brain to consciously acknowledge safety, provision, and community.
It actually changes the brain chemistry.
Yeah. It physically lowers stress hormones like cortisol and promotes the release of dopamine and serotonin, creating a feeling of deep satisfaction. It is the mental equivalent of checking the water taps on the very first day. She is verifying for her nervous system that her emotional needs are being fully met.
And from that solid, calm foundation of gratitude, the text zooms out, and we see the true metamorphosis take place over time. The following week, life slowly becomes normal. She wakes up and makes breakfast. She opens the windows to let the air in. She waters the new plants. She walks to the supermarket on autopilot and greets the elderly neighbor. These small, conscious actions become unconscious habits, and she realizes this is exactly how a new place becomes familiar.
It is the slow, invisible, powerful work of routine. Routine is the thread that ultimately weaves a person into the fabric of a landscape.
She visits a park about 10 minutes away. She sits on a bench and watches an elderly couple holding hands, a dad teaching his kid how to ride a bike, a group of friends laughing, a man quietly reading a book. And looking at this community, she realizes that true happiness comes from incredibly simple things. We trick ourselves into thinking we need something big, a better job, a bigger house, a newer car, to be happy.
When it's usually the small things.
Right. She notes that many of the most peaceful moments in life cost absolutely nothing at all. A quiet walk in a park, a cup of coffee in a familiar mug, a good conversation with a neighbor, watching a sunset from a clean living room.
At this point in the narrative, she has completely transcended the physical space of the house and found true belonging in the broader environment. She is no longer just surviving the trauma of the move, she is actively thriving in her new reality.
And then, the essay beautifully, cinematically zooms out to show the passage of time. We see the seasons change around the house. The small plants she bought grow taller and need repotting. The half-empty bookshelves slowly fill up with new stories. Soft, heavy blankets cover the sofa in the freezing winter. Fresh, bright flowers are placed on the dining table in the spring. Every season leaves a subtle mark on the space.
The space is living with her.
And one rainy evening, much later, she sits by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the rain hit the glass and soft music playing in the background. And she vividly remembers that just a few months earlier, this exact room was completely empty. No furniture, no pictures, no memories.
But now every single object has found its permanent place.
Every room has established its purpose. She sits there and remembers the physical pain of carrying the heavy boxes, the joy of meeting the neighbor with the cookies, the peace of cooking that first simple meal of chicken and rice. Those small, seemingly insignificant moments quietly, cumulatively built a home.
It is the perfect culmination of her philosophy. The essay argues, incredibly persuasively, that moving is not merely a geographic or logistical event, it is a profound emotional education. It teaches patience in the face of chaos, organization as a form of self-care, and the absolute necessity of letting go of old things and old versions of ourselves that we no longer need.
So as we begin to wrap up this deep dive, what does this all mean for us? Let's bring this home, pun very much intended. What is the core takeaway from Kathleen Pandy's text for the person listening right now?
The core takeaway is that the friction and discomfort you feel in the face of any new beginning is entirely natural, biologically appropriate, and should not be feared. Whether you are starting a new school, beginning a new job, moving to a new city, or just moving into a new house down the street, it will feel unfamiliar. The blueprint in your head will not match the immediate reality on the ground.
It's going to be messy.
But if you have the grace and patience to unpack one box at a time, arrange one shelf at a time, and introduce yourself to one neighbor at a time, that jarring unfamiliarity will inevitably slowly dissolve into deep comfort.
It is about trusting the slow process of time. Pandy leaves us with this incredible, beautiful distinction at the very end of her essay, which summarizes everything we've talked about. She says, "A house is built with bricks, wood, glass, and paint. A home is built with time, kindness, laughter, and love. That is the biggest difference. It is about starting the next chapter of your life, not with a frantic rush to the finish line, but one quiet, intentional day at a time."
It reminds us that we are the active architects of our own sanctuaries. The physical materials provided by the world are just the beginning.
Exactly. So if you are listening to this right now, maybe you're looking out the window halfway through that flight to a new city, or maybe you are sitting in your car and navigating your own messy, uncomfortable new beginning, I want you to remember that the friction you're feeling is just the feeling of your cognitive map being actively redrawn. It is exhausting, but it is completely normal. The discomfort is just the intimidation of the blank page of a brand new notebook.
Give yourself the permission and the grace to sit on the floor of the empty room with just a bottle of water and allow that space to be full of hope instead of anxiety.
But before we officially end today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over for the rest of your day. We spent this entire time talking about the intense, hyper-aware, high-definition process of moving into a new place. But what if you took that exact same intentionality and applied it backward?
What do you mean by applying it backward?
Think about that architectural blueprint we talked about at the very beginning of the show, the one that feels so rigid and sterile until you actually live in it. Well, what if you looked at your current, highly familiar home today with the exact same fresh, hyper-vigilant perspective you used during your first week in a new place? If you were to walk through your own front door right now, not as the person who has lived there on autopilot for years, but as a total stranger stepping in for the very first time, what forgotten memories would your objects tell you? What would the layout of your furniture, the scuffs on your floorboards, or that random chipped mug hidden in the back of your kitchen cabinet actually say about the beautiful, messy, ongoing story of your life? Break the habituation of your own life and see what you find.
That is a wonderful, highly practical exercise in mindfulness.
Try it. Walk into your own home today as a stranger and see what you discover. Thanks for diving deep with us.